The broadcast opened mid-sentence, but it was enough to catch fire. Jasmine Crockett leaned forward, her eyes sharp, her tone calm but electric with conviction. Across from her, Kash Patel smirked as if the stage belonged only to him, tossing out one more insult wrapped in condescension. He expected her to shrink back, to stumble under the glare of live television. Instead, Crockett didn't even blink. She waited just long enough for silence to cut through the chatter, then unleashed a line so precise, so devastating. It landed like a thunderclap. The words tore through the air, slicing Patel's confidence in half. For a split second, the studio froze. You could almost hear the collective intake of breath as the crowd, the hosts, even Patel himself registered what had just been said. The camera zoomed in on Patel's face. His smirk collapsed into confusion, then disbelief. He shifted in his chair, eyes darting toward the moderator for rescue, but none came. Across the set, Jasmine sat steady, her gaze unflinching, her voice reverberating with the kind of clarity that makes an audience remember exactly where they were when they heard it. The studio audience erupted. Gasps, whispers. Even a few cheers broke out before the host could regain control. Someone in the back clapped before realizing they were live on national television. The moderators shuffled their notes, visibly rattled, struggling to pull the program back to order. But order was gone. Online, the moment had already escaped. Clips of Crockett's comeback rocketed across Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. Memes were being born before the commercial break even hit. Hashtags ignited within minutes, flashing across phones. Hashtag Crockett clapback. Hashtag Patel stunned. Hashtag mic drop on live TV. Millions who hadn't even tuned and were suddenly demanding to see the clip that had stopped a broadcast cold. What made the moment so electric wasn't just the insult itself. It was the way it shattered the usual script of political theater. Here was a woman who refused to be cornered, who turned condescension into fuel, who spoke not just for herself but for every viewer who had ever wanted to see arrogance punctured in real time. And yet, as powerful as that single line was, it was only the spark. The confrontation was about to deepen. The stakes were about to rise, and what unfolded next would leave the entire nation buzzing. The shock of Jasmine Crockett's words still hung in the air, but the confrontation was bigger than a single exchange. This wasn't just television drama. It was a battle over the story America tells itself. The debate had been scheduled as a policy discussion, another forgettable panel where politicians and operatives traded rehearse lines. But underneath the bright studio lights, it had become something else entirely. A collision between two visions of the country. On one side sat Kash Patel, sharp-suited, seasoned in the art of spin, his reputation built on deflecting criticism and burying inconvenient truths. For years, he had carved a role for himself as a defender of a political machine that thrived on arrogance and bluster. To his supporters, he projected strength. To his critics, he symbolized everything corrosive in American politics, a willingness to bend facts until they broke. On the other side sat Jasmine Crockett, a congresswoman shaped by struggle and sharpened by service. She wasn't supposed to dominate the stage, at least not according to the pundits who dismissed her as untested. Yet in that moment, every word she spoke carried the weight of more than just personal conviction. It carried the hope of those who wanted politics to feel honest again, of communities tired of being talked over, of Americans craving dignity in an age of noise. This clash mattered because it wasn't about policy minutiae or polling numbers. It was about something far larger. Truth against spin, calm against arrogance, authenticity against performance. It was a kind of live showdown that made viewers realize they weren't simply watching two people argue. They were watching a struggle over what America could and should stand for. Social media didn't just circulate the clip because it was entertaining. It circulated because it resonated. For immigrants who knew the sting of being underestimated, Crockett's poise was a mirror of resilience. For young voters disillusioned by the theater of politics, her words felt like a reminder that authenticity still had a place in public life. Even older generations, weary of endless bickering, found themselves replaying the moment, whispering that maybe, just maybe, there was still such a thing as courage on live television. And Patel knew it. His eyes betrayed the realization that the debate had slipped out of his control. He tried to pivot back, leaning on his old playbook of bluster and dismissiveness. He reached for the same tactics that had carried him through countless appearances before, belittling, interrupting, steamrolling. But the energy had shifted. The audience wasn't buying it anymore. That's why this clash mattered, because it showed in real time the fragile balance between arrogance and dignity, between deception and truth. America wasn't watching a policy debate. It was watching a morality play unfold on stage. And as Crockett sat composed, as Patel scrambled for footing, millions of viewers saw their own frustrations and hopes reflected back at them. The stakes were no longer about who scored a soundbite. They were about whether honesty could pierce through arrogance in the very places designed to drown it out. The audience, both in the studio and across the nation, sensed that something rare was happening. A political moment that felt unscripted, raw, and real. And when Patel thought he had the upper hand, the tables began to turn. For Kash Patel, politics was never about principle. It was about performance, about the ability to manipulate narratives and bend the truth until it suited his side. He had built his career on a mixture of sharp intelligence and shameless opportunism, a dangerous blend that made him both effective and despised. To some, he was a loyal soldier who could be counted on to spin the most unspinnable of scandals. To others, he was a very embodiment of arrogance, a man who mistook swagger for substance, who thought the louder he spoke, the more convincing he became. Patel's rise was not born out of grassroots struggle or public service. He was groomed in backrooms, climbing ladders through loyalty and deflection rather than sacrifice. He learned early that politics rewarded those who could distort facts without blinking, who could smile while twisting the knife. Over time, he perfected the art of never answering a question directly, of cloaking weakness and bravado, of dismissing opponents with a laugh rather than engaging their arguments. And it worked for a while. Patel became a fixture on television, a regular presence whenever a network needed a defender of the indefensible. He carried himself with the confidence of someone who believed he could out-talk, outshout, or outright confuse anyone who dared to challenge him. Each appearance was another opportunity to smirk, to lean back in his chair, to exude the smug certainty of a man who believed the stage always belonged to him. But beneath that polished exterior lay contradictions impossible to ignore. For all his claims of patriotism, he often aligned himself with rhetoric that undermined democratic norms. For all his talk of loyalty, he turned on allies the moment it served his career. He thrived on division, treating politics like a zero-sum game in which dignity was expendable so long as he emerged with the upper hand. Critics saw through it. They pointed to his role in muddying investigations, in weaponizing misinformation, in twisting institutions meant to serve the people into tools for partisan gain. Journalists described him as slippery, a man who could dodge accountability with a grin. Opponents remembered the way he dismissed legitimate concerns with a wave of the hand, as if truth itself was nothing more than an inconvenience. What made Patel's arrogance particularly infuriating was the way he wielded it against those he considered beneath him. Women, immigrants, activists, anyone who didn't fit his preferred mold became targets for his dismissive tone. He relished the role of the agitator, the man who could rattle others with a sarcastic quip or a smug grin. It wasn't enough to win an argument. Patel wanted to humiliate. Gasps, applause, a roar from the back of the studio. The sound was deafening, the kind of eruption usually reserved for sporting events or rock concerts. Viewers at home could feel it. The electricity, the catharsis of seeing arrogance met with dignity, condescension met with fire. Patel tried to speak, his hand half raised, his lips parting as though to regain footing. But Crockett was already in full command of the stage. She gestured toward him, her expression calm but unyielding. You can interrupt. You can sneer. You can try to spin your resume like it's armor. But the truth doesn't need armor. And tonight, America just saw the truth. The audience erupted once more, a standing ovation that left Patel visibly shaken. He glanced at the moderator as if pleading for intervention, but none came. The cameras lingered on his face. The fading smirk, the tightened jaw, the eyes that betrayed his unraveling composure. And Crockett? She leaned back in her chair, a faint smile on her lips, not smug, not mocking, but resolute. The kind of smile that says, I don't need to shout. The truth spoke for itself. The camera cut to Patel again. For the first time in the debate, he was speechless. His earlier bravado, his smug interruptions, his condescension, all of it had been dismantled in a matter of minutes. The audience had witnessed the collapse in real time, and they knew it. One final moment sealed it. Crockett turned back to the crowd, her tone softening into something almost reflective. You know, they tell us to be grateful just to be here. But I say, America should be grateful for the people who never stopped fighting to make this country live up to its promise. Because without them, without us, this table would be empty. The applause became a roar, echoing through the studio. Patel slumped back, visibly deflated, his earlier confidence shattered. The cameras caught every detail. The pursed lips, the furrowed brow, the sheen of sweat gathering under the stage lights. It was a mic drop moment, the kind of line that would replay endlessly on Twitter, loop on TikTok, dominate headlines for days. Crockett hadn't just won an argument. She had owned the stage, seized the narrative, and burned her words into the collective memory of everyone watching. For the audience at home, the scene played like a climax in a courtroom drama. The truth-teller standing firm, the antagonist caught off guard, the crowd rising in approval as justice, at least symbolically, was served. And as Patel sat there, stunned, the silence around him was louder than any applause. The contrast was total. Crockett, calm and resolute, and Patel unraveling under the lights. The moderators tried to move on, but the energy in the room had shifted permanently. Patel could try to regroup, to reassert himself, but everyone watching knew the tide had turned. This wasn't just a debate anymore. It was a reckoning. And as the clip spread like wildfire, the real shockwaves were just beginning. The debate ended, but the story was only beginning. Within minutes of the broadcast cutting to commercial, the clip of Jasmine Crockett's mic drop comeback was already circling the digital globe. Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, YouTube Shorts. It was everywhere. The moment didn't just trend, it exploded. Hashtags lit up the timeline. Hashtag Crockett clapped back. Hashtag truth at the table. Hashtag Patel shook. Memes surfaced at lightning speed. One showed Patel's stunned expression frozen in mid-frame, captioned, "When you realize the script doesn't work anymore." Another split-screen Crockett's line. I didn't wait for an invitation. I pulled up a chair, with historic photos of civil rights icons standing firm against arrogance. On TikTok, creators layered dramatic music over Crockett's pause before delivering her final blow, turning her silence into a countdown clock for annihilation. Millions of views stacked up in hours. Gen Z voters stitched the clip with commentary like, "This is why authenticity matters." Millennials reposted it with captions like, "Say it louder for people in the back." Even boomers, long skeptical of internet political theater, were forwarding the clip in family group chats. Cable news couldn't ignore it. Primetime anchors replayed the exchange with theatrical slow-motion zooms, breaking down the facial expressions as though analyzing game film. One commentator declared, "This wasn't debate, it was a dismantling." Another marveled, "It's rare to see arrogance punctured so cleanly on live television." Late-night comedy shows seized the moment. Monologues joked about Patel's new career as a meme template and played remixes of Crockett's line over hip-hop beats. Audiences roared. The comedy mattered. It signaled cultural penetration. The moment wasn't confined to political junkies. It spilled into pop culture, where debates rarely tread. But beyond the laughter and memes, something deeper was happening. Crockett's words resonated far beyond the spectacle. Her refusal to frame her presence as luck touched a nerve in communities that had too often been told they should be grateful just to exist in spaces never meant for them. Immigrant families wrote posts about watching with pride. One tweet, which racked up hundreds of thousands of likes, read, "My parents worked 2 jobs so I could sit at my table. Jasmine Crockett just reminded me I don't need anyone's permission." College students spoke of finding new inspiration to engage in politics. Even young activists in cities thousands of miles away held up Crockett as proof that speaking truth to power still had an impact. Meanwhile, Patel's allies scrambled. Surrogates rushed to cable shows to spin the night's disaster, insisting it was just theatrics and not substantive. But their words fell flat. The narrative had escaped their control. Patel's name trended alongside words like arrogance and entitlement. Even conservative pundits admitted off camera that the optics were brutal. The ripple effect reached Capitol Hill. Colleagues whispered about how Crockett had cemented her reputation as a rising star. Supporters flooded her campaign website with donations so overwhelming that her team's servers briefly crashed. Patel, meanwhile, faced a barrage of questions from reporters that he could not dodge with his usual smirk. And then came the endorsements, not formal ones, but cultural ones. Celebrities tweeted their admiration. Athletes reposted the clip with captions like, "That's how you handle disrespect." Activists used it to rally volunteers. The moment had leapt out of politics and into identity, into culture, into inspiration. What made it historic wasn't just the dismantling of one man's arrogance. It was how Crockett transformed a dismissive insult into a universal truth. That presence isn't permission, it's purpose. That dignity doesn't need to ask. It claims its space. The clip became more than a highlight. It became a rallying cry. It became a story people told their children, a video teachers played in classrooms, a reminder that even in the chaos of political theater, a moment of clarity could still break through. And yet, as the noise rose, the hashtags, the memes, the applause, something quieter, deeper was also taking shape. Beneath the humor and headlines, a lesson was crystallizing. But beneath the noise, a deeper lesson was taking shape. As the storm of reaction surged across screens and airwaves, Jasmine Crockett's moment was already transcending the confines of a televised clash. To some, It was a viral clip, a perfect soundbite destined to be replayed for laughs and applause. But Crockett herself understood something larger. This wasn't just about her versus Kash Patel. This was about what kind of country America chooses to be when arrogance and dismissal collide with truth and dignity. She reframed the entire exchange not as a personal victory, but as a reflection of the stakes for the nation. Patel's sneers and insistence that her presence was luck was more than a personal jab. It was a reminder of how power often operates. It excludes, diminishes, and rewrites the rules so that only the privileged can claim legitimacy. Crockett's answer cut through not simply because it was sharp, but because it spoke to a broader truth. Dignity doesn't need permission. In interviews that followed, Crockett chose her words carefully. "This isn't about me," she told one anchor. "It's about every person who has ever been told they were lucky to be in the room when they fought for every inch of ground they've gained. It's about reminding America that we're strongest when we honor work, service, and sacrifice, not privilege and arrogance." The resonance was undeniable. Her words turned the debate from a skirmish between two personalities into a parable about America itself. Were we a nation that rewarded spin over sincerity? Were we content to let arrogance masquerade as leadership? Or were we still capable of recognizing that resilience, truth, and dignity are the real foundations of strength? Audiences found themselves not only entertained but inspired. Parents explained to their children why the moment mattered. Teachers used it as a discussion starter on democracy and respect. Commentators on both sides of the aisle, even those critical of her politics, admitted the clarity of the morals she had drawn. Arrogance crumbles in the face of authenticity. And that was a true victory. Not that Crockett had won against Patel, but that her comeback recentered the conversation around values that extend beyond partisanship. She had reminded millions of what politics could still be. Not a game of insults, but a forum where truth, if spoken with courage, could still cut through noise. For those who had felt invisible, it was a validation. For those who had felt powerless, it was a spark. And for America as a whole, it was a reminder that dignity, once spoken aloud, has the power to silence arrogance. The clip would fade from trending lists eventually. Memes would be replaced by new jokes, hashtags by new debates. But the deeper lesson would remain. Crockett's voice, calm yet unyielding, would continue to echo in the memory of that night. Not because she humiliated an opponent, but because she reminded a divided country of something timeless. That dignity is not granted, it is claimed. And as her words settled into the national conscience, a thought lingered in the minds of millions. If one comeback could shift a room, if one voice could pierce through the din of arrogance and manipulation, then what could happen if an entire nation chose dignity together? And if one comeback can shift a room, imagine what a nation united in dignity could achieve. On that night, the country witnessed something unforgettable. A live debate that began as routine television became the stage for one of the sharpest comebacks in recent memory. Jasmine Crockett stunned Kash Patel on live TV, not just with a line, but with a force of authenticity that shattered arrogance in real time. The audience gasped, the internet erupted, and for one rare moment, truth carried the day. But beyond the viral clip, the message endures. This wasn't about a single exchange or even two individuals locked in a clash of words. It was about what America values when the lights are bright and the stakes are high. Patel's arrogance was a mirror of manipulation, a reminder of politics at its most cynical. Crockett's calm defiance was a reminder of something deeper, that dignity, honesty, and resilience will always outlast spin. And that is why this moment matters, not just as entertainment, but as inspiration. Because if one voice, steady and unshaken, can silence arrogance on live television, then every viewer has reason to believe that truth still has power in the spaces that need it most. Here at the Liberty Desk, we believe in telling these stories with all the drama, tension, and emotion they deserve. Because politics isn't dry policy. It's a story of who we are and what we fight for. Every day brings new clashes, new revelations, and new moments that will define the future. So if you felt the rush of this moment, if you believe dignity should always triumph over arrogance, make sure to subscribe to the Liberty Desk. Hit that bell, share this video, and join a growing community that refuses to look away when the stakes are high. The story isn't over. It's just beginning.